All right, we can begin. How are we all doing? All right, so we should, where are we here? So we got through all our, no, we didn't, sorry. I'm a little bit behind here. So we're going to finish up with or continue with our research on education issues. We should be able to finish it up today. And then next week we'll do our last unit, which is on urban sprawl or suburban sprawl. And then it'll be time to get ready for the exam. We'll talk about it next week, but I think I want to schedule a special review session that will be separate from our, we'll just have to reserve it. It'll probably be this room. And so hopefully the following week, I don't know what date that is, the Tuesday, whatever that is, a week from next Tuesday, maybe we could have a review session for the final exam. So just giving you a heads up of where things are headed. And so I think where we're at with, we're talking about Schwartz and the debasing of education. And again, this is kind of coming at the topic from a more symbolic interactionist standpoint. Instead of looking at the funding of education or who has what, it's much more focused on what's the meaning of education to people. And as we talked about, the idea is that learning should be play. Play has to do with the intrinsic value of things. And work is something that involves the extrinsic value, or the reward, I should say. So Schwartz is making this argument that learning works best when you see the learning itself as the thing you're trying to get from the learning. When you start trying to have some other reward for learning, then it kind of debases, it devalues the learning itself. So if you say to a kid, I want you to go learn how to tie your shoe. And if you learn how to tie your shoe, I'll give you $2. Well, then you're saying, well, tying your shoe isn't the important thing. The $2 is the important thing. Maybe he'll do it. Maybe it'll motivate him. But it might be better to have the kid really care about having tied shoes, so that, if you're not there to give him the $2, he might just let his laces, fly all over the place. So anyway, it's maybe a bad analogy, but what I'm trying to just review here is the idea that in colleges, in schools nowadays, we more or less mainly emphasize this bottom line mentality. We say to students, what really matters is the bottom line, not the learning, not the process of every day you're learning something and gaining more knowledge, but we always emphasize the bottom line. What's the bottom line? Well, the grade at the end, the degrees that you get when you get all your grades, the job you get later, the money you get later from your job. Those are all the extrinsic reasons why you would be going to school. But the intrinsic reason is to learn the things that you're learning in school. And Schwartz thinks that when you really help students value the learning itself, then they actually learn much better. When you're valuing the other things, then people don't really learn. And we talked about the evidence he had for this, and but maybe a more important question is, what are the, and so we talked about, we talked about the evidence for it, and I won't review that, but it was things like the reading studies that showed that when you pay kids to learn to read, they don't really learn to read. When you just emphasize learning to read as the reason you should learn to read, they really do. And they find all kinds of good, valuable reasons to do it. But it's the learning that was valuable, not the money that you got for learning. But another question, and one that you can really think about is, well, what are the consequences of this bottom line mentality? If we tell students the reason you're in school is for all this stuff, not for the intrinsic rewards. In other words, turned it into work by valuing the extrinsic things rather than the intrinsic things. And we've done this, well, I'll talk more about when and why did this happen in a second. But if it's true that nowadays you're being told as a student, what really matters is your grade and your degree and the money you get later, then what negative consequences could we expect from students and that we are seeing from students? What kinds of problems might that cause, according to Schwartz? And if you could imagine his argument, why is it a bad idea to tell students what really matters is the bottom line? However you get to the bottom line, that's what matters, your grade. What bad things might happen as a result? Cheating becomes really widespread in schools when you tell students that what matters is the grade and we just want to see you get a good grade. I mean, you'd be stupid not to cheat. If you had a way to get the grade without doing the work, that would be rational. That would be the smarter way to get it done. But you don't really learn that way. If you buy a paper on the internet and turn it in, you haven't learned how to write, you haven't learned how to do research, you haven't learned about the topic that you were writing and researching about. You got a grade, but you didn't get much else. What other negative consequences might there be? So cheating is one. What else can you think of? When you make school all about work rather than about play and the intrinsic value of learning. I was talking the other day about, my own kids go from being really eager, curious kids to going to school and this is how they look. This is how you look right now. How students not look. So what are some bad things besides cheating that happen?
People dropping out.
Dropping out, high dropout rate. People say, I don't like school. I don't enjoy it. They're always judging me. Dropping a high dropout rate. And yeah, that's a lot of non-completion these days of high schools, of college. And people say, well, I just couldn't finish. I just couldn't stay motivated or interested. And again, if it's always about the grade and what the other teacher thinks, what other people think of you and how you measured up against other people, then yeah, it can be really stressful and not fun and make you feel terrible and not want to be there. But if it was about your learning, then every learning you're doing is a reward. Every day you got something that you learned that you didn't know yesterday, then that would be valuable. But we don't say it that way. What other consequences might there be?
Being exhausted?
Exhausted and yeah, just sort of bored, I would say. It's not just the exhausted, the yawning is really boredom. If you're not really interested in the thing you're learning, boredom and exhaustion, and it's also related to the stress. I mean, why cats yawn when they're about to fight. Like if two cats are about to square off and they're about to throw at each other, you might see one cat go like that, and it's a way of reducing stress. The cat's really stressed out right now. It's about to fight something, and to kind of let go of the stress, it yawns. And I think sometimes the reason students are yawning so much in school is they're stressed out, not just tired or exhausted. But yeah, it has to do with boredom and feeling, I'm not really interested in the thing I'm having to learn. And so it's really forcing me to keep my eyes open and stay focused. It's hard to do. When you really want to learn something like your video game, it's not hard to stay focused. When you really want to learn your ukulele or the thing you're trying to learn because you want to, it's not hard to stay focused. What else?
Failing the classes.
Yeah, failing, but what do people do to not fail?
Oh.
What would be a negative consequence of the fear of failure?
Not studying or not going to tutoring.
If you're afraid of failing, you won't study?
Oh, what?
If you're afraid to fail, what does that lead to in terms of your work? Are you gonna do really interesting papers? What it kind of leads to, what I'm getting at is, it leads to a mediocrity idea. Mediocrity meaning not really excellence, just doing what gets you by. The way I would summarize this is C's get degrees. You hear students say that nowadays, meaning I don't need to do my best work, I just need to get a C. If I just get a C, I'll pass the class. And that's not how we become a great nation. If you become a great nation, and great anything, by stretching yourself, by trying to do things you can't do, by failing because you tried new things. And if we have a society of a bunch of people that are never willing to try something new or something they are stretching themselves because they're just trying to avoid failure, then we're not really reaching our heights. We're just getting by. And, that's not a good mentality. Again, that's not the mentality that built this great country, as they would say. This thing of like, I'll just do the bare minimum. I mean, I see it all the time here at the school. I'll tell the school, like, this could be done. I'll say to the administration, we could be doing this thing better than we're doing. And they go, we're not obligated to do that, Mark. Not obligated. Do you want me to only do what I'm obligated to do? Because if I'm only obligated to come in and teach sociology, I can just give them a textbook, I can give them pre-recorded lectures. If I only did the exact obligation of my job, I don't think I'd be a very good sociology teacher. I don't know if I am a good one, but I know that I'm trying to go above and beyond what is the bare minimum of what you're expected to do. But students are being told, why would you ever go above and beyond the bare minimum? That would lead to failure, just do what you need to do to get by. And so I see this all the time, and it's kind of like cheating. I mean, a lot of times now students are just trying to write with AI. That's a new thing that's like getting ready to push me out of college teaching, because if students are just content to say, just have this computer write for me, well, then you're saying, I don't care if I can write or know how to do stuff. I just want to get a grade so I can get through. And I don't blame people for trying to get through quickly. But that isn't what we as the faculty and as the school should be emphasizing. We should be helping you stretch and do your best work and things like that. So anyway, there's a lot of these kind of consequences, and we see it all the time. In fact, I'll just tell this sort of anecdote, my own anecdote about all this. I used to teach at UC Santa Cruz, and I was a TA there. That was where my graduate school was done. And in those days, back in the 90s and before, the UC Santa Cruz didn't have grades. You would go there as an undergrad like you are now, and you'd take a whole class like this. In the end, there was no grade. And what did you get instead? You got what was called an evaluation. So at the end of your semester, you got a paragraph. And the paragraphs were often written by me. I was a graduate student, but I was the TA. So there'd be a big class, like 200 people in the class. I would have a section of the class, like 25 people, and we would get together, each week to talk about the lecture. So they would go to the lecture with the professor, they'd come to discussion section with me, and they would turn in papers that the professor assigned, and I had to grade their papers and see if they passed the class. And then at the end, you would write this evaluation saying, like, she wrote her first paper on conflict theory, and it was really well written and well organized, but it lacked depth of concept application. You're just explaining what they did, what they learned, what they did well, what they could work on. You're not ranking them. All a grade really does, A, B, C, or D, is all it tells you is how did they do compared to other people. If you got an A, you're in like the top 10% or something. If you got a B, you're somewhere a little higher than the average, but you're not as high as the A's. And if you're C, you're somewhere around average. And if you're below that, you're not passing the class. That just ranks you. It doesn't tell you what you learned in the class. It doesn't tell you what skills you mastered or didn't master in that class. And while I was at UC Santa Cruz, the business community of the country was putting all kinds of pressure on the UC system and on UC Santa Cruz and saying, why do you guys have this dumb old hippie system of not giving grades? Like you got to get with America. America's, capitalist country, and we need ranking, and you need to get with the program. So while I was there, they changed it, and it was the faculty. They were the ones that voted to say, let's go to a more traditional system of just giving letter grades to students. And at the time, I was really against this because I was like, one of the reasons I came to UC Santa Cruz, because I think it's really cool that they emphasize learning and your own growth as a learner rather than competition with other people as the measure of your worth. And being the one who wrote the evaluations, I'm like, well, it's really these professors, they have it real good. They sit around not having to grade anything, and then they're the ones that are going to change the rule so that, anyway, it was a long story, but But what's interesting, I'm not done with the story. So now here we are at Yuba College. Here I am, a professor now for many years. And the business community has again put pressure on higher education. And what has the pressure been about now? They've been saying, grades don't tell us anything. You keep sending us graduates that get A's in your classes, but then when we ask them in the workplace, can you write a business letter? And then they can't. Can you put together a proposal on this project we're doing with a budget? And they're like, budget, what's that? They don't know how to do it. So how is it that they got A's in your college business classes, but then they came here to the workplace and they couldn't do the things we need people to be able to do? So the business community again began to put pressure on people like me, saying, just giving grades, if they have an A, all that tells us is they were better than other people, but it doesn't tell us what they learned, what they know how to do, what they can't do yet. And so they've put a whole lot of pressure on us now to have what are called learning outcomes, student learning outcomes. If you look at all your syllabi now, they all list, here are some things that you're supposed to learn in this class. And those student learning outcomes, they put them all on, not just on your syllabus, but the idea is to put them out on the public, where the public can see them. And Yuba College is supposed to report to the public, like in sociology, one of the student learning outcomes you're supposed to have is you're supposed to understand the sociological research process, which I've been teaching about recently in this class. And then that way, and then I'm supposed to report at the end of the term what percentage of the students in the class achieved that learning outcome. I don't report who did what, but I'm supposed to report like 20% of the class successfully achieved that, or 80% of the class successfully learned about the research process, and 20% didn't. And you're supposed to put that out there so that an employer can say, hey, you're applying to work at my workplace. Let's see, you went to Yuba College, what classes you took? Oh, you took sociology, what did you learn in there? Well, on their website, they say you learned how to do research. You passed the class, you must be one of the people that learned how to do that. And so what I'm saying is they've really gone towards more like an evaluation kind of model. Instead of just grading people, they want us to really break down what it is we're teaching in the class, what people did learn how to do or didn't know how to do. I mean, they still only give you the grade, but as far as the school itself, we are being graded on a more nuanced set of things. And so, but what I'm just trying to say is that shows that the bottom line mentality, which the business community pushed, that's how they think. That's how the business world works. Things are valuable if at the end of the quarter you profited, the bottom line went up. And they're not valuable if they didn't help your bottom line. But in an educational space, that way of thinking might not always be the best way of thinking. Like we said, trying to turn students into like machines that just you put in the knowledge and at the end you have the outcome and you profited by this much, it doesn't really work that way. Learning is a very interesting thing because things you learn right now, you might not get them right away. Like at the end of the term, maybe you didn't pass the class and so you didn't get the learning outcome. But 20 years from now, when you are at a job somewhere and you're dealing with like, we've got to research this problem and you're like, oh, I remember it. So suddenly you talk about qualitative and quantitative and maybe we need to start with a qualitative approach and then move to a quantitative. It's like suddenly that knowledge made sense to you and it was useful to you and you were able to use it later. So knowledge isn't like this easy thing where you just give people the knowledge and then at the end of the term, they know it all. That's not really how it works. You take classes, some of it you got, some of it you didn't really. Later on, your brain puts things together, now you do get it. And so it's, anyway, so it's not good to have a bottom line mentality when it comes to learning. And it leads to these unintended consequences, we could call them. Unintended, which is a good term from earlier in the class. This isn't what we want to have happen when we emphasize the bottom line, but it is what happens. So what are the causes then? Why have we as a society moved towards this bottom line mentality, especially when we all kind of look at it and go, yeah, that's not really a great way of approaching teaching. And yet here we are, everybody worried about their grade, everybody using AI to write their papers, everybody, copying and pasting from the internet. Everyone yawning in class. So why did we let this happen, or how did it happen? There's been a more market-oriented society in recent decades. Throughout American society, we've become more worried about the bottom line of things rather than other things that we could value. A market-oriented society is one that values money, you know, over all other things, basically. A market-oriented means that you let the market decide what's valuable. The marketplace decides. And a lot of business people will tell you that's a smart way of doing business because, for example, let's say you make Hollywood movies or a Hollywood movie studio. If you just make the movies you think are cool, like let's hire a filmmaker and he can make whatever movie he wants because he's a filmmaker and he knows what to do. Well, he might make something he thinks really cool, but if millions of other people don't think it's cool, then they're not going to pay to see it, and the movie studio is going to have spent a lot of money making a movie that they can't get their money back from and make profit from. So a movie studio would say, it's smart to give the market what it wants. So like what movie studios do is see what sold last year. Like what was the most popular movie last year? Oh, it was a movie with superheroes fighting each other from, the Marvel universe. Well, let's make another one of those. And they've been doing that a lot, and now people aren't starting to go to those again. The market's like, we've had enough Marvel superheroes. So now they're like, well, now we got to give the market something else. The market determines what the Hollywood studio is making. And would that be a smart idea for colleges to say, let's give the marketplace what it wants? I mean, some people are saying that's what we're doing. Like a lot of colleges now say, you should come to our college because we have a rock wall. You can do rock climbing at our college. In other words, they don't say, come here because we have the best faculty doing amazing research and teaching you stuff. They say, come because we got a rock wall. Or we got a really cool sports team that you can cheer for. I mean, those are things people pay money for. The marketplace likes those things. But as educators, there are things we think you need that you might not want, You might not want to read a 500-page book by Karl Marx, but we might think as the educators that they need to read that. And so if you just let the marketplace decide, with education, you might end up with the marketplace demanding things that educators themselves don't think are the right thing to do. And again, we're not in the business of, so why did we become more market-oriented, and how has that affected higher education? Well, more and more Americans seem to say, we don't think things are valuable unless the marketplace thinks they're valuable. And can you think of things, that wasn't how Americans always used to think. We used to think that there are some things that are valuable that shouldn't be bought or sold. That you shouldn't be able to buy or sell them, because if you start buying and selling them, you'll actually devalue them. You'll actually make them much worse. You'll debase them. Could you think of anything that, in your mind, if people were allowed to buy and sell it, or let me put it this way, is there anything in your mind that people shouldn't be allowed to buy and sell? Because if somebody was offering it for sale and somebody else bought it, that would be gross, or that would be immoral, or that would be wrong. Or should the marketplace determine if people will buy it, I should be allowed to sell it? Huh? Degrees? Well, yeah, do you think that should be? Maybe we should just say, whatever degree you want, you should just pay for it. So a PhD in sociology is $10,000. And a BA in sociology is $4,000. If people just bought it, would you want to go to a doctor? Oh, I'm an MD, I'm going to do surgery on you, and I got my MD from the internet for $500. Does he really know how to operate on you? Would you want that guy to operate on you? So no, that's why we're saying, okay, are there other things that you would think it would be gross or wrong to sell? Like if you saw an ad saying, I'm selling this, is there anything you could imagine somebody was selling that you would go, dude, you should not be selling that? Or is everything? I mean, the fact that you're having trouble thinking of anything tells me that we are a supermarket-oriented society. We do think the marketplace should determine, and if someone's willing to buy it, I should be able to sell it. But Americans didn't always think that way. It used to be illegal to sell certain things. Can you think of anything that used to be illegal to sell, and now you can?
Like, medicine that doesn't work. Like-
Okay, so what were called patent medicines. People just say, hey, if you take this, you will never have cancer, and they just like mixed up some snake oil or whatever in there. Yeah, and that can be really dangerous. A lot of Americans, like Donald Trump, I think, would be a guy that says, no, I should be able to sell whatever I want to say is medicine. If somebody's dumb enough to believe it, then that's their problem. It shouldn't be the government telling me that I can't tell people this medicine will do stuff. So not all Americans do agree on that particular product, but are there things Americans would agree and say, you know, they shouldn't be selling that? Is there anything? Yeah.
Insurance?
What? Insurance? They sell a lot of insurance, although nowadays they're having trouble selling housing insurance. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because life insurance actually was one thing that when it first was offered. So the idea that you could pay money, a little bit of money now, so that if something catastrophic happened later, the money will be there to pay for it. That basic idea is used in a lot of things. Like that's how home insurance works. I pay State Farm a little bit of money each year to insure my house, and then if it burns down, they pay for it. But that's a problem in California right now because there have been so many fires that the insurance industry is saying, we're not going to insure any of the homes in California. But when the first idea came out to say, what if you could insure your life? So that I could pay a little bit of money each year so that if I die, my children and wife can get a bunch of money. Insurance companies first started promoting this idea. You just pay us a little bit of money each year, and then if you die, we'll give your wife and children a bunch of money. And they like to do that because most people don't die, so all this money they're getting, they get to use for making more money with. And then if somebody dies, they pay out a little bit. But people thought this was really immoral at first, because basically you're betting on death. You're betting, I bet you I'm going to die before you think I do. And the insurance companies think, no, we think you're going to live a good long life. So if you want to just pay us a little bit every year, we'll take it. And you're like, no, I'm going to die tomorrow. So, I'm going to have to pay you nothing. And you're going to have to pay my wife and children. It's like you're betting on your own death, and you're betting like you're hoping I'm going to die before I pay you more than you're going to pay my kids and wife. I mean, so people thought that was really gross, and we shouldn't allow this, and the insurance companies shouldn't be allowed to bet on your death. But in a capitalist society, the market-oriented society said, no, people want to pay for it, and people want to sell it, so let them do it. But I'm thinking of things like babies. If somebody said, hey, I just had a baby and I'm selling it, who wants my nice, healthy baby? People do buy them, but a lot of people say that's illegal, wrong to be having human trafficking. All kinds of human trafficking, many people would still say is wrong. Like if you say, I've got a 14-year-old girl and she's really cute, and there's men that want to pay to, take control of her. Is that legal? Is that right? So there are still things we say as a society, no, you can't be selling girls to older men and stuff. That's wrong. You can't be selling babies. You can't be selling drugs is another thing we still say as a society. Certain drugs are so addictive, so destructive that we don't think it's all right for people to be buying and selling it. But we as a society have become much more market-oriented in saying, well, let's just let the market decide. If the market doesn't think it's valuable, people won't buy it. And if people won't buy it, no one will want to sell it. But if people want to buy it, then people will want to sell it. And so it's the market that should decide. And, how did that affect us? Well, for one thing was the tax revolt of the 1980s. The 1980s were a big turning point in America. We've already learned that that's when we started to restructure our economy and become more of a capitalist, globalist economy. And that too is part of this whole more market-oriented idea of saying, hey, these companies can make more money if they move to other countries. So why do we have a law stopping them from doing that? the marketplace determines that labor is cheaper over there, so let them go over there and pay those people less, and they'll make a lot of money. And so that's how capitalism works. So don't restrict them from going to the countries they want to go to. It's called free trade, and it's part of the free market idea. This free market idea. And the tax revolt too is part of a free market idea. People began to say in America, why should I have to pay the government so much money that I get? People began to say, you know, I don't trust the government to make decisions about what's valuable. People began to say, you know, the marketplace decides where my money should go, and I don't want some government bureaucrat, you know, taking my money and then spending it on stuff that I don't think is valuable. Like, for example, if the government takes money and helps poor non-white women, you know, feed their kids, there might be some white men that are like, I don't want you using my money for that. Or if they use it to build public education, build, you know, community colleges, so that non-white, non-rich people can go to college. Some people over here might say, I don't think the government should be spending my money that way. So people began to revolt against paying taxes. During the golden age of American capitalism, earlier that we talked about, 1945 to 1985, taxes were quite high on the richest people. For the very richest people, you paid like 90% taxes. Nowadays, we pay 38% or so, 35% as working people, and for a lot of us, that's quite a lot. The richest people only pay like 15%. So taxes have come way down in America since that time. And California was where it started. Proposition, I need to go quicker here, but Proposition 13 passed in California that was the property tax revolt. I've mentioned earlier that property taxes are what pay for schools. But in California, older people that owned houses began to say in 1979, that's when this was passed, we don't want to have to pay so much property tax because, for example, our kids aren't in school anymore. A lot of the homeowners, people owning property, were richer, older, white people with kids that are already out of the house. And a lot of the people in school in 1979 in California were brown people, black people, Asian people's kids. And so these older homeowners were saying, and by the way, another thing that happened was California's property values went up really quickly. So you had all these retired people who aren't making any more money than they used to, but suddenly they have to pay a lot more in property tax because their property value went up. It happened to my parents. I mean, they bought their home in Santa Barbara in 1969 for like $39,000. And by 1979, it was worth like $200,000. That's a huge jump in the value of your house because everybody moved to California in the 1970s. So the marketplace determined that housing was going to cost a lot. But that meant that people suddenly found themselves with high tax bills, property tax bills to the government. And they revolted, said, we're not going to pay. And so in 1979, this law was passed that now says in order to raise taxes in California, the government has to convince 66% of the voters. 2/3 of the voters have to agree. That's called a supermajority. I mean, most votes to vote on something, to agree on something, we say if the majority want it, we do it, like 51%. But for taxes in California, you have to get to 66% want it. And most people don't want to be taxed, so it becomes really hard to raise any taxes in California anymore. A lot of people that don't like California would disagree with what I'm saying, but the fact is California's funding for education went way down. I mentioned that California used to be #1 in the country in terms of per capita funding for education. We used to spend more than any other state on each student in our schools. And California was known for having great education. And that was one reason why lots of people wanted to move to California in the 1970s. But nowadays, California is down near the bottom of states in terms of how much we spend per capita, per student. And a big reason is because of our tax laws changed how much, and I experienced this firsthand. So I was in
I was in fourth grade in 1978 when they were talking about this law getting passed, and they were saying it's gonna radically change how much money the schools get in California. And so since we'll be getting a lot less money, we're gonna have to change some things. They said one thing we're gonna do is close one of the schools in the district. So we had 3 elementary schools in my district, they closed one. And so they thought it was gonna be ours. And we're like, oh no, they're gonna close mine, I'm gonna have to go to some other school. Instead, they closed a different school and they all came to ours. Another thing they did was move all the 9th grades. When I was in school back in those days, 9th grade was part of the middle school. So you'd go to elementary school up through 6th, then you'd go to 7th, 8th, and 9th middle school. And they called it junior high. And then you'd go to high school. And then you might go to junior college, is what they called this. But now they call this community college. And they started calling that middle school. And middle school only had 7th and 8th. I saw bad signs of that. I knew girls that started high school in 9th grade. So the 9th grades got moved up to high school. And I didn't think at the time, and I saw evidence of it, that a 13-year-old girl in 9th grade should be in the same school with 18-year-old boys in the upper grades. And so I knew girls that got kind of debased, let's say, in high school, and weren't really ready to be dealing with those older boys. That's just one example, but the bigger point I want to make is schools used to have a lot more enriching stuff. They had to, because the school funding went way down, they went to basics, back to basics kind of idea. So funding was cut, in other words, for things. Budgets were cut for what? For things like art, music, home economics things, like, or shop classes, they call them. Sports. These are the kinds of things that make school fun, make school more like play. When I was in elementary school and my brother was in junior high, because he was older than me, I was excited to get there because he was in all these plays and all this music. They had actual sports teams at the junior high that you could be on. They had all this, they had jewelry classes, they had classes like this stuff you never would need, but they were cool. And then when Prop 13 happened, while I was in 5th grade, they brought that other school over to mine. They moved the 9th grades up to high school, and they cut all the art and music and sports and all the cool stuff. And they said, we need to go back to basics, which means, 3 R's. We just need to teach reading, writing, arithmetic. We don't need to have all this fun stuff. And my whole educational career since then has been seeing this debasing. Things that it was quite clear, things used to be great here, and the students loved the school, and the school had all this cool stuff going on. You could see it because you'd go to the office, for example, and you'd see all the old pictures in the office of how things used to be. And you'd be like, we don't have that. They had this huge wall of all the students that got all these awards every year for different stuff. They had a bunch of different awards they gave. And I'm like, do we even give awards anymore? And so all the things that were cool were now not available to my generation. And so it's quite clear to me that what they said would happen with Prop 13 was happening, that schools were getting, hollowed out in terms of what they offered. And I've also seen students through that whole time go from being passionate, cool people that wanted to contribute to their school in various ways and wanted to be engaged and want to do things like theater and cheerleading and band and football and really want to be involved with the school and involved in the community through their school. And all of that go towards this disengaged thing of let me just do my basics I gotta do and get out of here. Not like school, not like being involved in the community. Just be an individual, just get through, make sure I don't get failed. Not like we are the school, here's who we are. And so, so anyway, the debasing of education, devaluing learning, devaluing the school, devaluing all the things the school has to offer, and making it all about you and your educational career and what are you going to do with your grades and your bottom line. When are you going to start making money? And so it's not surprising to Schwartz that we see all these problems now in our schools. And he thinks we've made a bad choice to get more market. I mean, I would go further and say in the colleges and universities, there's been a total takeover of them by the corporate world. So that it used to be more run by faculty who are academic kind of people who care about learning, care about knowledge, we just like it. And it's more and more nowadays, the administrators who run the place are run by people that come more from the corporate world who just think in terms of bottom line mentality. So for example, all they care about right now is increasing enrollment. If we could just bump our numbers up, bottom line, more enrollees, then we'll be a great school. And so that means they only want to offer the classes that do fill up. But if you don't offer the things that aren't yet popular, and you never offer them, then people never are going to find out about them. And you'll just become a school that does basic things and doesn't go above and beyond or introduce people to stuff they didn't know about and that they didn't know they liked. And so you end up being more impoverished as a community. Like, I think this community actually could use a real college that did all kinds of stuff for students and had all kinds of things going on, instead of just being a school that's mainly about training welders and nurses and just kind of what's called a trade school that just trains you for jobs, that doesn't enrich the community with art and culture and knowledge and all that stuff. So anyway, what solutions does he offer? Or conclusions? Well, he says, you know, we should maybe have a laboratory model instead of the market model. So with education, we've turned the whole thing into what he calls a market model, where we tell people, you know, you need to quote unquote invest in your education. You need to spend money now so that you can profit later with more money at your job later. And we tell students you need to enhance your value on the labor market. You need to invest in your own skills and knowledge so that you can command a higher price on the labor market when you go out there. So we're treating students as if they were like products that we're making in a factory, and we're making you more valuable, taking raw materials, making it into a valued product that you can go sell yourself on the marketplace. That mentality is what's leading to this bottom line thing. But he says maybe go away from that idea. What's a laboratory? So market, the purpose is to make money. Purpose is profit. And if that's your whole goal, then yeah, learning isn't going to be valued very much. But what's the whole point of a laboratory? Why do scientists have a laboratory? What is the point of a laboratory? You know what a laboratory is? Like, they have them over there in science building. What do scientists do in laboratories?
Research
Yeah, why?
to find out new things.
Find out stuff, know stuff, learn new things. And so if your goal is to learn new things, then failure is actually okay. In the laboratory, when you run an experiment and the experiment doesn't work, then that's good. I mean, you learned from that. And if the experiment worked, you learned from that. But that's a different mentality than saying, I'm only here to profit. If you're only here to profit, then failure is not okay. I'm not gonna, why would I take any classes that I'm gonna fail? Why would I try any kind of paper or research topic that might not work out? I'm just gonna do what the professor tells me to do. I'm just gonna do what I know already works because some other students did it. And if you're, that's the mediocrity attitude. Just do what works because I know it'll, you know, get me some return on my investment. But if you think in terms of, I want to learn new stuff, and so if we had that attitude that we're all here to learn, and learning is good, and learning is why you're here, not we're here to rank you and grade you and find out if you're valuable or not, you know, then maybe it would be a more fun place to be, and a more exciting place, an interesting place. You know, scientists that have laboratories that are trying to find out something new, a lot of them never want to leave the lab. They like aren't very good family people sometimes because they don't want to eat dinner and stay there. They want to get back to the lab and see how the experiment's going. And that kind of drive isn't about money. It's about, I'm learning this stuff and I won't know the answer until the experiment is finished. And so they have a real drive to know. And that basic curiosity, is what I think makes us human, and our schools should be fostering it, not stamping it out of people and telling them to not be curious and not try new things. Anyway, so that's Schwartz, and you see he's dealing more with just how we think of education and trying to get us to think about it in a new way and feel about it in a new way. So he's taking a cultural approach, what I'm calling symbolic interactionist, because he's looking at the meaning of education, which is very different from Kozel, who is more focused on the structure of it, who has what and how do we fund it. The third one that we're going to talk about is, of course, going to be from a more functionalist standpoint. And functionalists, again, are people who want to understand how things work together in the society and try to get things working together in a smooth way. This one is called What No School Can Do. And it's by Traub, Jonathan Traub. Again, just not making you know these names, but I also don't want to plagiarize. And this one's more of a functionalist perspective, because he starts with this idea that school reform must do more than reform schools. So let's break that down. So school reform, what does that term mean? It's a general term for efforts to try and make our education system work better. Again, functionalists look at things in terms of institutions. So if we think of education not in terms of just this idea like Schwartz was doing, but we think of education in terms of an actual building block of our society. It's the education system that we have in California and in other states. Like I said, everyone these days recognizes that our schools aren't doing everything we wish they would. We talked about the manifest functions of education and, learning the basic skills, learning to be a good citizen, learning, legitimizing meritocracy, as we talked about. And almost everybody, whether you're a conservative or a liberal or a teacher or a business person, would admit that our schools aren't doing as good a job as we wish they would at any of these things. The business community is complaining that people don't know how to do stuff. People like me are complaining that we've, corrupted education and debased it. So everybody admits we could be doing better as a society. So they say we need to reform our education system. We need to fix it. Fix or improve or, address these issues. And what are the school reforms? This goes beyond Traub's article because he wrote it a while back. But we're still talking a lot about education reform in the country these days. Some examples include, No Child Left Behind. It was a law. It's called the No Child Left Behind Act. So as I've mentioned, our school systems are run by the states. So each state has its own school system. But George Bush, the second George Bush, George W. Bush was president when you guys were little. And he had been governor of Texas. And as the governor of Texas, he billed himself as the education governor. That really helped improve Texas's education system, and they could point to a lot of data and evidence to say, yeah, while he was governor, it went from being this to being better. And so he said, that's what I want to do for America. I want to improve, I want to reform education in America so that we can achieve some of the same gains that Texas was able to do. And so he led the creation of this thing called the No Child Left Behind Act. And what was it about? It was about standardized testing, really, standardized learning and testing. So one issue that I wanted to address is, since all the states run their own education system, there was a lot of inconsistency across the country in terms of what you would learn. So if, for example, your dad was in the military and you were in 10th grade in California, trying to finish. And then he gets restationed in Florida, and now you're in 10th grade there, but it's totally different what the standards are and what you're supposed to know there. Then it throws you off. And so one goal was to say, let's standardize the learning across the country so that we know that American young people are learning the same things and expected to learn the same things pretty much everywhere in the country. That was one goal. Another goal was to say, how do we know if schools are doing well or not? We want to be able to, the federal government said, we do have money to give to states. In other words, each state runs its own system, but all the states would love to get some big bucks from the federal government, from Washington, D.C. And so Bush said, if you want to get this money from us, you're going to have to do these new tests. And we're going to rank the schools. We're going to see, which schools are doing well. And if you're doing well, we give you money. If you're not doing well, we take money away. Well, that had some unintended consequences that you can imagine. If you're telling schools, you got to do good test scores or else you're going to lose money. What do the schools do? Well, the schools do a lot of the same things students do when they're faced with that kind of bottom line thing. The schools started cheating on the tests. They would take all the student tests and then correct them, or they would actually kick out students or expel students that they know wouldn't do well on the test, so that the only students they had were good students. I mean, all kinds of little sneaky, fishy, shady things schools were doing to make sure their test scores were high. And moreover, most of the schools were failing the tests. And then if you take away money from the schools that are failing, you're not really helping them turn that around and start doing better. I mean, again, it's this mentality, if we punish people, they'll really shape up. Well, if you're failing to teach people, then getting punished doesn't make you more able to teach people. And so when Obama came in, they changed it to the race to the top. Oh, another big issue I want to bring up with standardized testing. I mentioned the shady things. The basic thing a lot of people remember and point to is what's called teaching to the test. If your whole school's value and money is based on the test scores, then that really creates this weird incentive on the teachers and the school to only teach the kids what they need to know for the test, and to spend all the time in classroom time getting ready for the test. And that's not real learning, because there's no way that one test can cover all the things that you should know. And if the school is spending all the time just helping you do well on that one test, they're not serving you well, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff you should be learning. So Race to the Top was supposed to turn this around. Race to the Top was Obama. So this was George W. Bush, GWB. This was Barack H. Obama, BHO, Barack Hussein Obama. And it was essentially the same law. I mean, they recognized, they said, yeah, the schools are failing to achieve the standards that we set for them. And that's creating an unintended consequence of the worst schools getting even worse, because they're getting money taken away from them. And the best schools already are good, and they're getting rewarded with more money. So Obama said, let's turn that around and say, at the beginning of the program, if you're not achieving the standards, then we actually give you more money to address that problem and figure out why you're not achieving the standards. And with this new money, hopefully you can improve your test scores. So then later, when we do the test score again, if you still aren't achieving them, then we start taking away the money. But hopefully we see improvement the second time around. And they changed some of the ways the schools were monitored and the timelines of it. But it was essentially the same goal of let's standardize the learning, use standardized tests as the way to measure it. And overall, schools haven't really been improving in America as a result of this change. That's what we're getting at. If you just try to change the school, you might not get very far in terms of actually changing student learning. Another thing people have tried is things like charter schools. My kids are in a charter school. Charter schools were meant to sort of take education out of the hands of the existing teachers and teachers' unions, and basically say, well, each school gets $6,000 per student, as I mentioned, in California. So the charter school movement, it was called, began to say, well, why don't you if I want to start a school and I can get people to attend, then why don't you give me $6,000 per student and I'll use that money to run the school and I'll do a much better job than the teachers' unions and the existing public schools. And if we give parents a choice of where to send their school kids, like if they can send it to the charter school or they can send it to the existing public schools, then that'll create competition. It'll create like a marketplace so that the schools have to compete and try harder to do better than the other school, or else they're going to lose all their students. And so America's really been experimenting with this idea and giving people the chance to start new schools. You have in Marysville Charter Academy, and a bunch of other charter schools. My kids go to a charter school that, in that case, and I think in the case of Marysville Charter School, some of the charter schools are actually still within the district. They're still run by the public school district. They're just separate. They don't have to use the union teachers and stuff like that. So they can do things cheaper. Charter schools, some of them are doing a really good job, but some of them exacerbate the problem that we're talking about. If you make it all about choice if you try to create a marketplace for schools, you're increasing the bottom line mentality. And you're and in fact, there have been like these companies that said, hey, we can make profit here. If we could open up 100 schools and get 10,000 people to enter them, and we can educate each person for $2,000 a year, then that's $4,000 profit we'll get for each student. And so those for-profit charters, they have a really bad record of making money for their investors, but not actually getting their students to the point where they can do well on tests and stuff like that, because they're just trying to make money. They're not trying to actually be good educational institutions. So all of this, and so charter schools don't have, I don't think, a good solid record of saying this is the way we fix education. So this brings us back to Traub's point. What does he mean when he says, if we're going to fix schools, we have to do more than fix schools? In other words, all these policies that just focus on the school themselves aren't showing much progress. And so he's saying it's because we're not looking at the problem correctly the way a functionalist would look at it. How does a functionalist look at it? So functionalism has this concept of interconnectivity. Key word for you here, well, all these that I write down are pretty much key words, but interconnectivity is a functionalist idea. It's the idea that social institutions are interconnected. So yeah, we have the school system, that's one of our social institutions. We were learning about other social institutions in this class. Can you think of another social institution that's interconnected with the school so that the functioning of the school, we have schools here, like Marysville Charter Academy or Yuba College. And what other institutions in this community is the school connected with, interconnected with, so that the functioning of the school, you can think of it kind of as a schematic thing, just like a functionalist looks at it as a machine, like an engineer would. Engineers try to look at the system. What are the inputs into the system? What are the outputs of the system? And the system is connected with different entities, so that different entities are connected in the system. Schools are one of the entities, but what else are they connected to that affect their functioning? Can you think of other things that schools, it kind of relates back to that idea of stakeholders. What are the other stakeholders in the education system, and how do they affect the functioning of the schools? We learned about one earlier. So if an elementary school is trying to educate its kids, what other social institutions that we've talked about in this class would be prominent to think about in terms of affecting how the school does its job? What's another one we just studied in this class? The family. So the family is a big social institution. How does the family affect the functioning of the school? Can families just do whatever they want and the schools will be fine? Or are there things schools need families to be doing so that the schools can do their job? Can you think of any functions families are supposed to perform? So in terms of functions, what functions does the family have that we've talked about? And what functions can we expect schools to have? And how does this one performing its job affect or not, if it's not doing its job, affect this one? What kind of functions are families supposed to perform that if they don't, the school will have problems?
Helping students with homework?
So sometimes helping with homework, or what we could say is we expect the parents to help with the learning. And so we can say that we really expect families to promote literacy, I'll say. Not just help with the homework, but make sure your kid reads and can read, and make sure you are reading with your kid and that you're helping them learn and you're reading their homework and reading their newsletters and stuff, and that you are staying connected with them. Or what we could call, I'll add it to yours, is parental engagement. But yeah, parental engagement is what the school wants from the parent, but what the parent's supposed to be doing at home is, making sure their kids can read. Are there other things families should be doing at home? I mentioned like they had map testing this week for my kids, and the school sent notes home to us telling us what you should be doing at home to make sure your kid's ready for map testing. Well, what kinds of things?
Making sure they're sleeping and eating enough. So
Exactly, good sleep, good eating, that they're calm and rested and all those things. So in other words, basic nutrition, hygiene, that they're clean and neat when they come to the school. What else? And so the point about interconnectivity is the school can't really do its functions if the family's not doing its functions. And they're really connected with each other. I mean, the school can be helping the family achieve its goals. One shared function we could mention is socialization. Both the family and the school are known as socialization agents. This is what functionalists call them. We expect families to socialize kids. We as a society you and I depend on other parents socializing their kids, right? So that they don't come out of their homes and cause havoc and crime and all kinds of problems. Or, like clean bathrooms. Is your school gonna have clean bathrooms? Anyway, and and the school, we expect schools to socialize kids too, teach them basic things about how to operate in the society. And so the two things are supposed to be functioning together, but if we just change schools, if we just put more testing on schools or more pressure on them to do better, or even if we give them more money. That was another point I wanted to make about school reform. We talked about the vested interests earlier when we were talking about school funding and why people like ExxonMobil didn't want to give more money to Mississippi schools, and conservative people say, yeah, I don't want to donate my money to the schools. One reason they'll say is it's just throwing money at the problem. A lot of conservatives say we shouldn't just throw money at a problem, because if you just throw money at it, it might not fix the problem and you'll have wasted all this money. And a lot of conservatives have justified the cuts to education by saying, we don't want to just throw money at a problem. And Traub is agreeing here that because schools are connected with other institutions, sometimes if you just increase the funding for a school and give it more money, you're not going to necessarily improve things because the problems lie outside the school. So what other things besides the family are schools connected with? Well, neighborhoods is another thing. If neighborhoods are filled with crime and mixed-use neighborhoods that are introducing kids to smoke shops and pool halls and stuff, I mean, if you have all that kind of stuff surrounding the school, it makes it hard for the school to emphasize learning and, good behavior and all that stuff. if kids are stressed out and scared of the gangs. In LA, they had a problem where they told the kids, you gotta go to this school, not that school now. And all of a sudden, the kids weren't showing up, or they were showing up 2 hours late. And they're like, what's wrong with these kids? Why aren't they coming to school? Why are they showing up late? And when they finally asked them, they're like, well, this new school is in the rival gang district from our neighborhood, the rival gang territory from our neighborhood. So when we walk right through their territory, we're gonna get jumped and jacked and all kinds of stuff. So in order to get to school now, we've got to go way around that territory and come over here, and that's how we get here now. And so the school like didn't even realize, like, they're just focusing on the school. These kids won't get here on time. Well, if you're totally oblivious to the interconnectedness of the school with the neighborhood, then it looks like the kids are being bad kids. But really, what they were doing was preserving their lives. Another, the media is another big institution that's connected with schools. And, if all of our TV shows make fun of schools and teachers and make it not cool to learn and just emphasize being pretty and hot and strong instead of being smart and well-educated, then yeah, kids are gonna value being hot and strong and kick butt, but not, be smart and know how to do things. And there's a number of other institutions, but his point is that if we're gonna fix the schools, we've got to think about how they're connected with other institutions, and we've got to think about, a whole systematic approach here to fixing the schools, not just this narrow, short-sighted approach to just looking at the school. So what would that look like if you were going to try to reform schools in a way that didn't just focus on schools? What would it look like? The most promising thing is to think about how to integrate families with schools so that they're helping each other do their jobs rather than just failing each other. And he talks about a program called Impact. Impact program. It's from New Jersey. I think Impact was probably an acronym at one point, but it's been so long since I read the study, I don't remember what it was a acronym for. But what it was, and I think MP is in here, it was a multi-purpose social service agency located on school grounds, or school sites, we would say nowadays. Site-based, we would call it nowadays, because it's at the school. But what's a multi-purpose social service agency, and what's it doing at a school? Well, it's the idea that families have various struggles, and especially around things that we just talked about, things that can help the school do its job, things like literacy and nutrition and other things. And so the idea is, if we can have basically a set of government programs available at the school itself, that families can go to the school and get access to those things, then maybe both will be doing better. So what do we mean by multi-purpose social service agency? What would you suggest? If I were going to come tell you we're going to put one of these things at, Yuba College, well, maybe that's too high, too old. We should be thinking in terms of elementary school. Think of like Ella Elementary or Alicia School. I don't even know which ones are around here anymore. Some of them they got rid of them. But imagine an elementary school, and the teachers there care about the kids, and the principals do, and everyone wants the kids to be learning, but they have some problems with kids learning and not passing. So what could you, if we're going to put a little facility there at the school, what services could you offer, or do you think should be offered there that would help families? I don't know if any of you are parents, but a good way to think about it is, if I'm a parent trying to raise good kids and trying to work with the school on that, what would be some cool things for them to have there at my school that I could take advantage of?
Free lunch or like after school care?
Yeah, so after school program is one of them. That's a big one that I don't know why we haven't done more of that as a country. We told part of the market-oriented mentality in America and the tax cuts was reducing welfare and social security for women and saying to women, you gotta go back to work, you gotta stop being a stay-at-home mom and a single mom staying home with kids, you gotta go get a job, sister. Well, we said that, but we didn't at the same time say, well, here's where your kids can be while you're at work. And it would be such a low cost and helpful, good way to keep kids safe while their moms work, if you had more after school programs. As it is, people have to find places to put their kids, and those cost a lot of money in a lot of cases, and it's not easy to do. And so schools could be doing more of that. What other things do you think you could offer that would help the family function? Like literacy, why do you think some people don't read to their kids? And how could the school help you as a mom or dad be more literate and more involved with helping your kids with their homework? Like, why don't some women? Is it because they hate their kids, or they're too busy drinking beer, or
Maybe, some of them don't speak.
English?
Mhm.
And maybe if you had language and literacy programs for the adult literacy program, you can come here and learn English for free. We can teach you how to read to your kids and good stories to read to your kids. Adult literacy, so again, helping the parents learn some things so that they can help their kids learn some things could be a very beneficial thing. What's another reason parents struggle with having their kids ready for school? You mentioned lunch, I think, with the after-school program, didn't you? And so like nutrition programs actually are a thing. A lot of families don't know really very well how to feed their kids. I don't know about you, but it's not that, it took me a long time to learn how to cook for myself at home and then start learning how to cook for kids in a way that they would want to eat it and that it was also healthy and it was affordable. And a place around here, like in this area, they call this area, Linda, a food desert. Because if you're really trying to feed people healthy stuff, if you lived in these apartments, I think they're called College View apartments across from the college on Northfield Road, you have to go at least 2 miles, I think, to get to the nearest fresh produce. To get to the Walmart where they have fresh vegetables is like 2 miles. And so that's the definition. I think it fits the definition of what they call a food desert. It should be a lot easier. Plus those things are very expensive. And a lot of people find it's cheaper to like buy Sunny Delight than orange juice. But Sunny Delight isn't orange juice, it's sugar water. Or you buy your kids Pop-Tarts instead of whole grain bread. And just to leave you with this idea, nutrition has a lot to do with learning. College students forget this and they think, oh, I'll just eat ramen all the time and I'll be fine. But if you're not getting your full nutrition, your brain can't process information and hold on to it. And if you eat a bunch of Sunny Delight and Pop-Tarts in the morning, you get a sugar rush in first period and you're all ready to go. And then you get a sugar crash in second and third period. And so a much better way to have nutrients all day is to eat like whole grains, like whole grain, whole wheat bread, whole fruit and vegetables. Those take longer to digest. The sugar is released slower pace, so you stay more up and aware and alert and able to process information for longer during the day. So just helping teach people, here's how you can feed your kid fresh food. Here's a cool place so you can go get it. Here's a free farmer's market over here. Here's a food pantry over there. Just helping people feed their kids is a great way to help them with learning. All right, I should bring food for college. No, that's why they have a food pantry here, by the way. They started realizing that Yuba College, we could do a lot more by giving students what they need right here, things they're struggling with when they're at home, like food and healthcare and mental health and all that stuff. All right, we'll see you next week.